Welcome to part 17 of the Angular from Scratch video series. In this video, we're going to add a dedicated service to get data from the GitHub API. So this video is a bit of a continuation from the previous one. To begin, let's first do some cleanup, namely remove the ghdata.name from the app component HTML template file. Now in app component TES, we're also going to remove a reference to the ghdata variable itself. I'll also remove the private HTTP client right here being injected in the constructor. I'll delete the entire ng on init right here. And let's bring this up a little bit. Then I'm going to remove the HTTP client imports from this class file, and that should be it, I believe. So now that I save everything, my app should still compile and work as expected. Now remember that in one of the previous videos we worked with the Angular router and we had home profile and login right here. So what I want to do in this video is I want to add my GitHub user data to the profile right here. So to begin, as already announced, we're first going to generate a separate service for the GitHub user data. So let me increase the terminal window right here and click the plus sign to get a new terminal window. And I'm going to type ng for generate service GitHub user data. So this is camel cased, and now I'll press enter and that will generate two new files right here in the root. So let's stretch this a bit, the Explorer sidebar, so that I can now more easily locate the GitHub user data service spec ts file. That's just a testing file, and the GitHub user data service.ts file. And this looks as expected, as we've already seen in the some data service ts that we generated a few videos back. So now let's do this quickly. First, I'll add the GitHub user data service to the app module, because that's going to be my data provider now. So going to the app module file, I'll add it right here inside the providers array. And now that I paste it, I get this red underline and a light bulb here. So if I click on this, it's gonna suggest how to fix this error, and it says add import from GitHub data service. So this is what happens when I click it. It gets added, the service itself. So now I have this service right here. And let's now add the HTTP client to the services constructor. So back in here, in the constructor, I'm importing HTTP client. So I'm going to say private HTTP. And now I'll code a method of the service here. And this method will be named getGitHubUser. And this is going to be pretty similar to what we had in the ng on init from the previous video. So I'm going to say this dot HTTP. So I'm accessing this one. And when I type the dot, I get the helpful autocomplete. So I'm accessing the get method here. And I'm passing in HTTPS api.github.com/users/someone. And we already sort of saw this in the previous video. And now I'm just going to return this. So I'm not subscribing like I did previously. I'm just returning it from the getGitHubUser method. Okay, so now I'll go into the profile and display the data from GitHub in the profile component. To do that, first I'll need to go to the profile component TS file, and right here let's see export class profile component implements on init, and let's add here the data that we're going to receive. So we need to store that data in a variable. So let's say GitHub user data, and we'll set it to any to avoid any potential errors. And now here in the instructor, I'm just gonna inject the GitHub user data service. So I'm gonna say private GitHub user data service, and I'm going to import the GitHub user data service. Let's click the icon right here to close the Explorer briefly. So now everything is in view. No need to wrap the code. So I've got private GitHub user data service accessing the import of the GitHub user data service. And now inside the ng on init, I can say this dot GitHub user data service dot get user. That's our method. So let's see if it's gonna autocomplete. Yeah, so it says get GitHub user, and we're going to subscribe, and we're gonna get the user from this observable. So the data that we receive is going to get assigned to the GitHub user data. Now inside the profile template, let's just output the user.name or GitHub user data.name. So profile component HTML, we're going to delete profile works, and instead we're going to interpolate some master syntax right here, and we're going to say GitHub user data.name. So now I'm going to file, save all, and I get someone. So let's say profile page, GitHub user data.name, file, save all again, and we get profile page someone. So in case you replace the accessed name right here to something else, like for example, let's say coder, perhaps, Control S, and indeed there is a profile page named coder. So there you have it. We might then continue making this, I guess, a bit more dynamic. For example, let's say that we have a variable called username, and then set it to any for now, and then let's just interpolate the name here instead of coder as the username. And of course, I'm going to have to use backticks here because otherwise this won't work. And of course, I forgot the keyword this here, so this dot username, and now file, save all again. And this time everything should work. But of course, we haven't set the username to anything, so let's set it to, we had coder right here, so let's make it a coder again. So file, save all, and now we have the profile page. So if we change that back to someone, we're gonna get the data for the someone person, and now everything works as planned. So let's go through all the steps again. To reiterate, we first generated a new service, GitHub user data. Then inside the app module, we imported this data provider so that it can be used in any file of our app module. And then of course we had to import it right here and use it in the providers array. Then back inside the GitHub user data service file, class file itself, we basically injected the HTTP client, and then we used it right here inside a custom method that we built, and we just returned whatever came from the API call. And of course, we made it a bit more dynamic using the username variable here. And then inside the profile component TS class, we've injected the GitHub user data service that we imported and made as a private variable. And then in the ng on init, we accessed the GitHub user data service, then the method get GitHub user, and we subscribed to the data feed. got the user data, and assigned the user data to the GitHub user data that we defined right here. And then finally, inside profile components template file, we simply accessed the data that we have. So that's it. That's all there is to it. Pretty simple. And in the next video, we'll just make our app a bit prettier by finally using NGX Bootstrap and updating our existing code.